Hello. Apologies for using the restroom. All right, let's see who we have here. Sandra's here. Yay. Okay. All right. Are you ready to look at scripture lecture for
I began to work in my HA. I did the HA, but the scripture I got it today. I didn't get it before, but I began to work on my scripture HA. And another thing is I begin at HB as well, but the HB I got stuck in some in the one piece there that I didn't got the number right, and I don't know why. I will wait to
in 8B you said?
yeah. I began to work on HA because I finished my HA,
Mhm.
but now I begin to work on the scripture HA. So I will wait till you show us, then
Are,
I can get better.
oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, but like maybe next week you work on a HB, and then I will get the place that I am stuck. I don't know why. It's like I got the wrong number.
You-
I did all the step the book said, but I get stuck there. Maybe I will watch the video as well, and then when you do the scripture HB, I can you know get where I am stuck.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Sounds like a plan for me. Yeah. So okay. Oops. Okay, went to the other side. Did that. Oh, that's gonna go. All right. So in that case, I'm gonna share my screen. This one. Okay. So with module 7, we're gonna be looking at chapter 8. So using data analysis, solver, scenario features, and building complex functions. So the idea is to use some more statistical functions that are found within Excel, but also to look at some data analysis tools that you can do within Excel. Data analysis is a huge buzzword, has been for a few years now, probably for like within the last decade, but it's becoming more and more prevalent because people see the need, more jobs opening up with it, more degrees are coming out with it in the name and things like that. But it's been big for the last 10 years once people realized how much they could do with data. People always knew, and this was always being done, but it's become so much more prevalent. And so, because Excel is such a powerful tool, and you can do some of these data analytic modeling and um, some assessments within Excel, it is important to teach this for you all to see it. So, if this work. There is a link on what if analysis. We have seen the what if analysis. If you recall back from module 4, where we did goal seek. We also did a data table within that. We did goal seek where we had a formula and then we tried to change a value in one cell based off of changing another. Like when we were looking at the loan amortizations. So how much would you pay for a loan or end up paying on a loan if you had a set number of payment periods, and if you had a set interest rate. So what will happen if you wanted to get to a certain goal, like you wanted to pay a certain amount every month? How would that change the interest rate? How would it have to change the amount of the loan that you initially borrow on? How would it have to change the number of payment periods? And then we also looked at a data table where it did that same thing, but allowed you to do it not in one dimension, meaning only change one thing at a time, but it allowed us to see how do we change things across the board, or not across the board, but in 2 dimensions. We can go further with that as well. The idea of the scenario manager that we're going to be looking at within this module allows us to look at multiple scenarios at a time and also save that information so that later on we can go back and say, oh, which one do I prefer? The solver allows us to do a form of analytics modeling known as optimization, and many of the technically many of the different models you could do in data analytics are all based off optimization. I showed you guys how to get a regression line, like the equation, whenever you do a trend line. You can go more in detail with that, and I'll try not to as much because I work with that a lot in my own schooling and just in life. So I'll try not to go too much detail, but I do want to like point some of those things out because it's kind of cool to know. And again, it's a hot buzzword. So if you know how to do it and you like get interested in it, then we have pathways and other courses that can be taken so you can learn more about it. If you are in a business track, you have to take GBS 220 or Math 217 or mathematical methods for business or quantitative analysis or quantitative methods for business. If you ever take a course in any of those, you will learn some of this. Statistics as well. You look at some of this as well there. So, okay. Enough of the real general talk. There is once again a link to UCF Learn Free if you want to look at some stuff with what if analysis. And so, of course, here we go with the example project and all that there made available to you all, and what you will be going through 8A and 8B for this. No G this time, just 8A and B in this module. And there's a reason for that. There's only really 2 weeks left, the way I see it within the school year, not including the finals week. So, but as you can see, we'll look at a couple of things. Moving average is a way, is another analytics modeling, a way to model. And it has to do with looking at an average, but over a set period of time. We can do forecasting or projections. So we're trying to predict what a result would be after a certain amount of time. We do that based off what's given to us. A break-even point, and I'll go over these, of course, when we get to them again. But the break-even point is, have you ever like decided that you want to make a change in something or buy something or maybe sell something, but in order to do so, there's a cost on the other side. So, for instance, if I want to sell, my family has a business where they sell produce and other things. But for instance, watermelon is one of the biggest things that they sell. And so when it comes to selling watermelon, what price should I sell this at? And I have to think about how much I paid for it. So a break-even point is where at the end I have zero profit. So that means I neither gain nor lose anything. So that's what a break-even point is. So you can use Excel to do that. A solver, you give it an equation and it solves it for you. So if you've ever taken a math course and you've been wanting to solve for X, this will do it for you, so to speak. This is what we'll actually use to do some optimization models as well. Look at different scenarios, use logical functions. We've already used some logical functions. We've looked at the if, and there's a couple others as well. And the idea of complex formulas, don't think of complex as it being hard. Think of complex as it just has more to it than just us. No, we're taking a sum of this column. We're taking a sum of this row. We'll add a little more into it. So that's all it is. And they have a couple of slides here for you all to look through. So if you feel like you get stuck and you're on a certain section, I will go to this because this will be, I feel like, especially in this chapter, this will be most helpful for you to at least take a look at, oh, this is what I should be seeing as I move through, or these are the buttons I should be selecting, things like that. So, and then we go straight into the project. So we're gonna deal with the scripture lecture for A though right now. And so I'm gonna bring it up and we're gonna get into it. So, all right. First things first. Someone popped in. Looks like. Okay, I'll keep that up just in case. So, first things first. We are going to. We got Excel open, so it should have scripture lecture A, 8A sent out to you. So you should have that available to you. It tells us to save this as 8A Candy. I normally just say, I just normally keep going with it, but this time I will actually do that. So save as. I'm gonna go to my folder where I have things, and I'm gonna do my 8A candy. And I'm going to put my fall 2020 on here just so I know for the next year when I do this again. Okay. And what you'll notice is that we have all of this data here, but we're going across multiple rows. There's actually a funny video I was looking at from October. I'm talking about this because this this is an issue. You don't want to, if you have data like this, why not just have it in 2 columns as opposed to going across, what is that, 22 columns, right? And actually, does this go further? See, I don't think it does. It goes, yeah, oh, actually it does. It goes a lot much further. Look how far out it goes. It goes all the way to AV. So it's 26 plus 22 more. So that's 48 columns for just those 2 things. It's ridiculous. It's much easier to see that just in 2 columns, right? So there's a case that actually happened in, I believe it was October this year, it might have been September. But it came out from Europe, and I believe it was technically the country of England where this happened in. It may have just been in Europe in general, but I believe it was England. And they had their they were saving their COVID positive case files in an Excel spreadsheet like this. But they were also doing it in this way. So they had, for each patient, there was a column. Instead of having the patient's data go on a row. And there's some other issues they had, but there aren't that many columns available in Excel. There's about 65,536. Hope I got the number correct. But they even had an older version, so it was even less than that available in columns. Now you can say, well, why would you need that much? But some of the things they were importing in had like 5 columns for one person. It's a little ridiculous the way it was set up. But imagine trying to cipher through all that data, and you're going all the way over here, and it's much further than going to AV. They were very, very far. And so that creates an issue. Right? It's hard to see what's going on. It's hard to even maybe create a formula for it. It's hard to be able to analyze data when you're only taking up so few rows, but taking up so many columns. And so one thing that you may want to do instead is kind of switch this around. Instead of this being 2 rows and 48 columns, why can't this be 48 rows and 2 columns? Well, it can. So what we're going to do is we're going to select A3 to AV4. So they got everything. And I'm going to copy this. And I'm going to click in A5. And I'm going to paste this here. But when I do paste it, I'm going to paste it a certain way. And the way I'm going to paste it is known as transpose. All right, so you can even see my preview that it makes it from those 2 rows and 48 columns to 2 columns now. And we'll have 48 rows. But what transpose means is exactly what it does. It switches your rows and columns. So those of you that have ever taken a course in mathematics that involved matrices, you may have heard of this word transpose. But that's what transpose does. It just switches rows and columns. And so in this case, that's a good thing. So we can paste it using transpose. And we do so, this is what the result that we end up with. Okay. And so now that I have that, that's a lot easier for me to view and see what's going on, right? In fact, it's easier for me to even see. I didn't recognize this at first. Maybe some of you all did, but it's easier for me to recognize that, oh, these are going from September 15th all the way to October 31st. Right. So I don't really need this other stuff anymore. I don't need my column 2 or my row 2, 3, and 4 because I have all that now starting in row 5. So I'm going to delete these rows. And now I can, as I said before, much easier see the data that's here. And so I am going to now click in cell A3 as it asked me to do. And we're gonna modify a couple of things here. So one of the things that we're gonna change in really what we're doing right now is we're about to set up so that we can do a moving average. But before we do that, whenever you're doing any type of analytics, the first thing that you want to do is look at your data, make sure you can understand it and it's easy to see, and also clean it up. And cleaning it up could be like we just did. You know, it wasn't anything necessarily wrong with our data, right? But it was harder to see. It was hard to understand what's going on. It stretched across multiple columns. You couldn't even view it all easily in one screen, like in one screen view. And so we transposed it, made it a lot easier for us to view it. It's easier to see, like I mentioned, that it's going from September 15th to October 31st. Probably easier for us to check that those are correct, that we don't have any dates skipped. But we may also want to do some other things. We may want to change the format of some of these cells. Maybe we don't like the date format that's there, or maybe we don't like that this comma style here that's been custom made. Whatever, we can make that change here though. So I am going to have A3 selected, and I'm gonna have A3 selected, and then on the home tab, I'm gonna go to my number group, and I'm gonna launch this dialog box for formatting it. So this will be our format cells dialog box, will be on the number tab. So something that you all have seen before several times now. We've looked at every one of these tabs now underneath the format cells dialog box. So, but in the number one, we have modified, I believe we modified date directly. We changed, at one point, we changed the date to be in the 03/14/12 format. But what we're going to do is we're going to go to category, and we're going to click custom. What custom does is it allows us to, and I mentioned this before, but this allows us to directly decide how do we want this to actually look. Okay. And you can see that the example we have of 15 September, what it's actually doing is it's using the English version in the US to take the date and then dash the month, and with the first three letters. And so that's how that's set up. So that's what this is meaning. What we're gonna do is we're gonna change this up ourselves. So we're gonna select what's in here. Oh, sorry, let me get it all. And we're actually going to instead type that we would like to have MMM space DE. And so I want the month, 3 letters, and then I want the date to be in 2 digits. That's all I would like to have. So one thing to note is before I did that, look what September 15th actually is represented as, 42,628. And so you may have seen that before. Whenever you're changing a date, all of a sudden you see 5-digit number, you're like, what's going on here? Well, this is what it actually is encoded in the background. And so we make modifications to the way that that is presented to us by formatting the cell to a certain number format. And so in this case, we are customizing that completely by typing in the code, so to speak, of that it'll have to follow and how it'll be formatted. And so I'm gonna click OK here. And what I'm gonna do now is I am going to copy that down. Notice it still says September 6th because it's following the pattern there, September 17, and I'm gonna copy this all the way down to October 31st. Remember that when you use a fill handle, sometimes looking at, as you were to copy down, look at the screen tip to see if it's gonna look as you would imagine it should. And I always suggest that because it's just good practice. It's a good practice to have, checking the screen tip to make sure it looks exactly what you expect it should look like. Okay, so now that we got that done, it's a lot easier for me to see that this is the 15th of September, and this is just cleaner for what we want to do. Some of you may say, what difference does it make for having 15-sep to saying sep 15? It could just be easier for what needs to be viewed or easier to understand. Sometimes when you are manipulating these, like that 15 minus sep could have changed to 15 minus 9, and now it returns a value of 6, right? So you like having it this way, it's less likely for that to happen. I've done that myself, and it took me a while to realize that I made an error somewhere when I copied something over, and it was just the date. So stuff like that does happen, especially in Excel. I mentioned in a class before how there's an actual group that looks at spreadsheets, and they get hired sometimes to just look to just like for audits, not as auditors, but they really just look at spreadsheets to look for errors, and they like to talk about how many errors there are with spreadsheets. And most of the time, it's when people try to use spreadsheets to do a large amount of data analysis at once, or like where I mentioned earlier how there was a data getting cut off because they had more patients and they were putting patient information in columns versus rows. There's about there's 10 to the 10. Is that correct? 10 to the 10 or 2 to the 10? There's like 16 million rows available. So imagine doing that versus the 65, over 65,000 that I mentioned before of columns. Big difference, right? So
I have a question.
yes.
At the book, I think it said we do the date differently. Should I do the way it is in the book, or could you do like that? Because I like it to look like better, I think.
Well, let's see if I have the book on me. So you should always do in regards to stuff like that, because they may have a different format in the assignment that you're working on. If you're talking about more in regards of how they told you to do it, then
yeah, but the following steps, like here on the scripture as well.
Yeah.
They said that the scripture for we put on the date DDD.
Yeah.
Comma space DD.
Yeah.
But like I like it better the way you did. But the book, I think, say the same. To we do maybe put the day first. I like it. Tuesday,
Yeah, so it does say, the book does say DDD, comma MMM space DD. So that is the type that you should put in. You should put in the one that you see in the book.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. The book also has like little date codes in it in a table, which is cool because then you can look and see like if you put like 1 M, what does that look like? If you put 2 M's, what does that look like? If you put a certain number of D's, certain number of Y's, or whatever, that way you can understand more of what are you typing. To be perfectly honest with you, I have never looked up what those are. I have always just played with it. I've just like, I know I got D's, M's, and Y's. I got something to do with days or dates, months, and years. So let me just type in a certain number and see what comes out. That's literally how I always do it. Probably be easier to maybe look some up or try to memorize it, but for the most part, it's kind of easy to catch on to. If it's something you're going to work with a lot, you will catch on to certain little things. Like I mentioned earlier, how DD was like gonna put like a 2-digit number. If you put 1D, it just gives a number. So if it was like the number 1, if we put D, then it would put 1. If you put 2 Ds, it's 0, 1. 3 Ds gives you like the date, like the day of the week, like Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. And then 4 of them like actually spells out the entire day of the week. But again, I didn't like let me memorize every possible date code to type. Like, no, I just play with it and see what I get. You have a lot of custom ones that are already built in there because they're all based off of the other ones that you see in the other categories in number format. So what I mean by that is all of these that are pre-programmed in have something within this custom area. All of them are in here. And so if you want to know like what certain things do, excuse me, you do get a sample preview up here, but you also can just play around here and see what changes to happen. So like if I had a number over here, such as this, what would that look like now? So yeah, that's pretty much it. Just play around with it. It's good. It's good practice, especially if you're doing things on your own. For the sake of the project, you just follow along with the book, and it's trying to just get you to understand that you can customize these. You don't have to stick to a specific format. Okay. All right. So Next thing we need to do was the Autofit Column A. So remember that you can just double click on that on the border here, or you can go to the format group, or sorry, you can go to the format command under cells and do auto column width. So now, in order to do moving average, we're gonna do a couple of things. We're gonna set up a total here. So I want to know what's the total amount of sales from this time period of September 15th to October 31st. So I'm gonna type total here in A50. And then in B50, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do my auto sum, which I know Sandra loves to do with all equals. And notice it goes B3 to B49 if you wanted to, oops. If you want to check that to be sure, you could always, scroll up to make sure it's capturing everything, which it is. So I'm gonna press enter. If you wanted to type out sum and do it that way, you could as well. Now that we have that, I'm gonna apply a special style to this. So I'm gonna go to the Home tab, which I'm already at, Styles group. In Cell Styles, I'm gonna select Current at the bottom. We have number format. These are the formats that we normally put up here. And we've talked about these before. Our accounting format is the currency. Our accounting format with 0 decimals is this one. Comma style is comma style with 0 decimals is here, and then percent is here. We talked about why these have been created, because they are the most common ones used, right? So that's why they're there. So I'm going to select currency 0 as the instructions say. That way I can see my sales are in dollars and cents, and I see the total of them nice and easily. So let me actually zoom that in a bit. Make that a little easier to see. And then I'm gonna finish this off with the total cell style. Again, something that you all are used to. That line above and those double lines at the bottom to let people know where our total is, and also bolding it. So that's how you can customize a number format. Are any questions about customizing number formats? All right, sweet. So the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna look at creating a moving average. So we're gonna look at one of these data analytics models, and I'm gonna discuss what that moving average actually means. So before we do that, we'll have to add a couple of things to our Excel, possibly. And so those of you that are on a Mac, you may want to look up you may want to look up add-ins to see how to do it. I know that you go to tools and do a couple other things. It's been a while since I usually have to see the map myself in order to make the change. So bear with me on that. If you do have any questions, please contact me and let me know. But you should be able to look up how to add add-ins on a Mac, Excel Mac, and you should be able to find something easily to help you with that. But I am going to go to Backstage View. We're going to bring up Excel's options menu. And so to do that, I'm going to click at the bottom here to options. There we go. And my purpose to this is because we're going to add in something that's known as an add-in. And I want to explain what an add-in actually is as well. And so what an add-in is kind of like a package added to Excel. And what that package does is it allows for you to use other commands that people created. You can create some yourself as well if you would like to. And that means that you pretty much can kind of load it in to your Excel file. So they'll be saved somewhere and then you load them in. Some people think of them as macros, which is right to think that way. Because essentially that's what it is. You created some kind of macro, something that automates something. And then you're adding it in so that it's always there. With other macros, you have to either attach it directly to the workbook or make it a binary file, or make it into an add-in so that you can always activate it whenever you want to use it. And so what you see here when we click add-ins, we have a couple of them. right now we have no active add-ins, at least on my Excel that I'm on here on this computer. My others, I have a couple of things already added in. But we're gonna add in probably the most popular add-in for students, and that is we're gonna click on the excuse me, we're gonna click on the analysis tool pack. Another popular one for people is solver add-in, which we'll look at later on when we do use the solver. But the analysis tool pack will have pretty much everything you need. Do not use the VBA version. So that's where we'll talk about VBA next week or in the next module at least, whichever happens first. But that's Visual Basic for applications. So that's more of like what it looks like in the coding in the background. So we just want to look at the actual dialog boxes and commands that people created and make doing this a lot easier for us. So you do see some information down here about who created it. This add-in is actually made by the Microsoft Corporation, which is nice. You could create your own and stuff like that though and bring them in as well, or get one from someone else. It's telling us where it can be found and things like that. And then a brief description. Notice it says provides data analysis tools for statistical and engineering analysis. So under manage here, you have a couple options. We're going to do an Excel add-in because that's what this is. It's an add-in for Excel. And I am going to click go. Most people will come here and they'll just click OK and call it done. But I'm going to click go. Notice that there are a couple of add-ins it says that are available, right? Because these are the ones that were inactive, but we can make them active. So I'm going to select Analysis Toolpack. Because we're going to use Solver later, I'm going to go ahead and select Solver as well. And look at the description for Solver, tool for optimization and equation solving, which is the things that I mentioned before that you could do with Solver, solve equations, and then use it for optimization, data modeling. So, all right, now that we have that, I'm gonna click OK. And we will notice a change in this. And I usually like to show this beforehand. So, but you can recall what your data tab looks like. You guys go ahead and click OK, but I'm gonna do this so that way you can see what this looks like. So go to my data tab. Notice I get my get and transform data, my queries and connections group, my sort and filter group. I have my data tools group, my forecast group, and my outline group. So there's nothing else here. Well, now I'm going to go to my options, go to my add-ins. I'm gonna add those two things that I mentioned. I click OK. Watch very carefully what happens, honestly, over here. But look what happened. It added another group here. It added an analysis group, and we have data analysis and solver commands that have been added to that. As I said, when you do the add-in, you're adding in other commands that you can use. So now we can do a couple different things. So I'm going to use the data analysis tools. So I'm going to click on that. We have so many different things available to us. We have ANOVA tables, for those that get in statistics, correlation covariance. We have descriptive statistics, like if I want to know the mean, median, and mode, and stuff like that. Exponential smoothing, which is another data analytics modeling method. F-tests, Fourier analysis, histograms was like the bar charts you saw, but they're all actually connected together. Moving average, that's the one that we're going to be looking at today. And so many more. Some of these, if you've ever taken a statistics class, you probably look at this and you're like, oh, I didn't know that was there. That would have made statistics so much easier. Yeah, it would have. And also, this is what people use in the professional world, or they use some type of programming language. But most people will use Excel because it's something that you have. If you're in an office setting, you have it. You know, most companies will have bought it. So we're going to be looking at moving average. So I'm going to select moving average. I'm going to click OK. All right, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about what a moving average actually is. So what it does is it takes the average of a set number of items, however many we tell it, and then it moves along. So for instance, if I said we're going to take a moving average for 3 inputs, we would take the average of these first 3 things, and then we'll move forward and take the average of these 3 things, move forward, take the average of these 3 things, and then we could compare those averages and see how it moves, right? So think about this in sales. What would you want to see happening with the moving average? You most likely want to see them increasing, right? You want to see that average go up. Well, this will allow you to be able to see that, and you can graph it, and you can maybe look at different trends of like, oh, during this week, maybe you do it for 7 days for a week, so you can see each week, am I actually going up? Do I want to look at sales daily? I could just do that. Well, this is already average sales in a day, right? Because each sale represents a day. But if I want to see it weekly, I can look at every 7 days and see how it changes. So that's why it's called a moving average. Instead of you taking the average of everything, you take an average of certain parts and then you move it along the interval. So that's just a general topic of what a moving average is. Again, there are a couple courses that we offer at South that go more in detail about it. I would go more detail about it as well if you want me to. Just let me know and ask questions. But this is a very common tool used, especially when it comes to forecasting over time, because it can give you a good estimate of what's going to be the following average after the data that you have. A good estimate. I didn't say the best estimate. So in the input range, according to the instructions, we're going to take B2 to B49. And recall that B2, what does it say? It says sales. That's our label that's in the first row. So that's why we're checking label in the first row here. In the interval box, we're actually going to use the number 7. And this is actually because, like I mentioned before, we have the daily sales, so it doesn't make sense for us to look at each day. But what's the next best thing? You may want to look at your sales weekly to see what's happening from September 15th to October 31st. You know, maybe this is candy. What happens from September 15th to October 31st in regards to candy? Well, we're getting closer to Halloween, right? And so most people would buy some candy. So this could be a great way to see, hey, are Randy's candy store sales going up as he would expect? How much candy should he probably have in stock so that he can make sure he has enough to sell? You know, whatever. There are a lot of questions that we could answer here. But anyway, we'll look at things weekly. So that's why 7 is used here. Output range, where do you want the information that we're about to, the analysis that we're about to receive from Excel? Where do we want it to go? And so I'm gonna just put C3. That means it's gonna put our results starting here. Okay. A couple other things we can get from it. We can get a chart output, which will show us how things increase over that 7 interval period, so that 7-day period. So we can better visualize what's actually happening with the average and see how it actually moves. Standard errors will tell us, how far off things are on average as we move along. But in this case, we don't need to worry about that. So I'm gonna click OK. And notice we get our moving average, which we get our moving average, so we can see in blue. This is what actually happens. So we have our little diamonds to mark off each one of these days. And then we have a forecast, which tells us this is how many, this is what you would predict would happen at this day. This is how much it would be. This is how much it would be. This is how much it would be. So you can see it kind of shows that we are increasing, right, gradually in regards to weekly sales. So notice here that it actually does give us a result. This result is this forecast. So this would be the prediction based off of that moving average that you would have how much candy sales would be on this day. and then it continues to move forward from there using that previous average, that date's forecast and the other stuff it had before to kind of predict what's going to come next. And so sometimes people think of this as it smooths it out, which is true. This is a form of another, model that we saw in that data analysis toolpack, exponential smoothing, which all it does is it smooths out these lines. See how these lines just go up and down, kind of jagged? Look at the result we have from doing a moving average though. So one thing to note is that this may be kind of hard to see. And so one thing that we can do to make this a little easier is to move it. We've moved charts before, right? So I'm gonna select my chart. I'm gonna go to the design contextual tab that was created when we inserted the chart. I'm gonna go to the locations group and I'm gonna click move chart. And you all know I like to move things to their own sheet. So that's what I'm gonna do, but I'm gonna call this the trend chart. And I'm gonna click OK. Lo and behold, it's definitely a lot easier to view, right? Especially when it takes up the entire sheet, or it is the sheet, I should say. And we can see how we get these jagged approaches of things that are going above and below the averages. But we smooth things out with our moving average. And we can see that we are steadily increasing over time in our cells, which you could probably see from the blue as well. Especially if you look at the low points, you can kind of see that it's continuing to go up for the most part. If you look at the high points, you can see that same thing as well. Okay. All right, so so next they ask us to click on select data. So for the horizontal axis, we're gonna edit the labels here because, let me go back. If you look at the horizontal axis, we have our days here. Notice it just says data point because it doesn't know. And a data point, which I mentioned when we looked at the using a database, is just like it's just a record. So in this case, it's, like we're looking at this data point because all of this is information about what's going on at this point in our data. But in this case, we probably could better define it by saying that this was September 15th and this one's September 16th, right? So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna adjust the chart so that it actually has that same understanding. Because when the chart was created, those dates weren't in mind because we did our chart based off of the moving averages. That information didn't get put in here, but we can put it in here now. So I'm gonna click edit here. And I'm gonna do A9 to A49. Oops. Me. Okay. And the reason I'm starting at A9 is because for my moving average, my values don't begin again. The values do not actually begin until the 7th one. Okay. I'm gonna click OK here. Lo and behold, we go from having 1 to 47 to actually now having the values that we need. So starting at September 21st onward. So I can click OK here. And now we can see that we have a great change that makes it a little easier to see what happens day to day, right, between the points. So we can make these a little better even still, right? So I'm gonna open up the format axis pane. I told you all before that I prefer to go to format tab up here and then select the axis I want to change, or select the element of the chart I would like to change, and then click format selection. But sometimes it's easy for people just to double click on the area they want to modify or to format. And so what I'm going to do is I am going to change my axis options. So I'm clicking on that little thing that looks like a bar graph, clicking on axis options. And what I would like to do oh, is I'm going to actually modify the number here. Notice that it still has that same custom format that we had earlier that we changed. I can modify this if I want to just say dates. The reason I'm saying that is because that might be easier for people to see on this chart as opposed to what we had before. I can modify the type because those are pretty long, right? Including the year the way that is. So maybe I would modify this. And plus I know these are all the same year. I could do instead 3/14, a lot shorter and easier to read now than what we had before. Okay. Yeah. So this will always say moving average if you use the moving average command from the toolpack, but it probably will make more sense to most people if you made a change to this. So what is this actually representing? This represents the sales from September 21st to October 31st. And so that's what I'm going to put there. So now it's easier for me to understand. And I can see that clearly from here, right? Okay. All right, any questions at the moment? We've done a lot. Okay, so there were a couple of the modifications, changing the font here. So I'm gonna select this guy again. I'm gonna right click to get the font just to be a little quicker about it. And I'm gonna change the font size to 12, so it's a little easier to read. So made it a little bigger. And I'm gonna change these values here on the vertical axis. I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna go to the options here and I'm gonna pick on number. And these have to do with sales. So I'm gonna make them sales. So I'm gonna choose currency. And we're cool with 0 decimal places because these are just in thousands, so it's a little easier to see. All right, cool. So we modified our chart, which we've done before in the previous module. We modified the chart. We saw how to modify the different chart elements and format them. But what we have not seen so far is a chart that actually has 2 series on it, right? We've normally had just 1 series and modified it the way it looks so we can see everything. But we have 2 things here, right? We have yes, go ahead.
I have a question. How did this affect on the horizontal?
Oh, how did I change the font of it?
Yeah, because I did change the number, but my number is not like that. You know, the effect you give. It's
Like
yeah.
So yours doesn't say like 921.
No, it said that, but I say the effect you give, like it is not like straight. You know what I mean?
Oh, like how it's diagonal up?
Yeah.
Oh, it did that automatically for me.
Because
Yeah. Did you change the font to 12 so it'd be a little larger?
Yeah.
Okay.
I did, but you like the way it is not like yours, like different.
Yeah. I have no other way to tell you. Like it automatically did that. I didn't change anything. Like we can change some stuff. So if you, that's why I went to this alignment here. If you were to double click on it or to go to the format tab and go to the current selection group and select the horizontal axis, you could go to alignment here. And what this does is you're literally telling it how to align. So with that little tick mark, I selected middle center, and notice it says text direction horizontal. So these should be reading straight across. It turned it up because of how it needed to be viewed, because otherwise these wouldn't all fit. So it will do that automatically. But if I want to, I could legit type in an angle for it to tilt something. So
yeah, but like mine is the same, like middle, center, horizontal, but what you should put on the custom angle?
nothing. I wouldn't worry about it. Mine just looks like that because that's what it did so it could fit. So
Okay.
yeah. So I wouldn't worry about like trying to get it to look like that. See if I can try to make it look really can't. Yeah, I can get it. Oops. Go back to 75.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I hope that makes sense though. Like if you really wanted to change that, you could just change the custom alignment. But you don't have to for this. It should have, some of you may have automatically changed. It didn't earlier if you look back, or if you get a chance to look back at this video. Earlier, it didn't make that change. It didn't actually do that until I changed the font, I believe. So yeah. Okay, so let's see. Let's look at the forecast series now. So I can either select it here, or I can go up to the format tab, current selection group, and select forecast here, series forecast. And so the reason I want to do that is because I'm going to make some changes to this. Well, I may not have to actually do that, but what I want to do is under the series options here, I want to change the plot series on secondary axis. And there's a reason I want to do that. Notice on the primary axis, they're together. If I do secondary axis, what happens is that we get another axis here that we can compare forecasts to. So if I do that, plot secondary axis, notice that this is now in regards to what's happening here. Now, being 100% honest with you, based off the way this data looks, I would be looking at it being plotted on the primary axis. The reason for that is so I can clearly see the cells in one dimension. Like these are all referring to the same cells. So now I can see that all of these guys, they're a little below 2000 and then they come above it and kind of start leveling off a little bit. If I do it on a secondary axis, I can still see that, right? I can still look at this and say, oh, this started at below 2000 and then went up. But for some people, that can be very, very confusing. You know, if you're looking at this point here, someone may look at this and say, oh, that's about 4,500. And you're going to be like, what are you talking about? That's totally, you know, like 2,700, because they don't realize that it should be based off of that. So I just wanted to point that out, that this is what the instructions ask you to do. Your book tells you to do something else like that. In real life, would it make sense for you to do that? Probably not. You always want to modify and format your chart so that it makes sense, so it's easy to understand. Okay. All right. So that's actually enough with the chart. Are there any questions about modifying our chart or looking at the moving average chart, what it does, what it's telling us? No. All right, sweet. So next up, we're gonna go back to the sales sheets here. Ooh, what happened? There it is. And we're gonna make some modifications. So in part D here, or in column D, I am actually gonna start in B21. And what I'm gonna do is, I am going to do a calculation to kind of see from C21 to C14, which would be those 7 days again. How much did it increase by? So week to week, how much growth do we actually have? What's the percentage of growth we have? Again, I'm doing that. I'm picking those 2 days because there'll be more data to follow up with. Right? If I go from 14 to 21, I could go from 9 to 16, but then this had nothing previous to it, so it doesn't really make sense to do so. And then starting from 14 to 21, we have those 6 days, 6 days to take care of beforehand. So it could be arbitrary. You could pick anything, but that's just the reason why these are selected here for this example. So I'm gonna do equals, and there's a formula given to you in your instructions, but we're gonna do C21 minus C14 divided by C14. And again, this is just so that we can see the growth, the percentage growth, which we have done a calculation like this several times, or well, I shouldn't say several, but many times beforehand, where we took a value minus an older value divided by the older value so we can see what the percentage of change was. If I click enter, I see it's about 18%, but for some people, they won't realize that's 18%, right? So we should change it from this accounting style or accounting style into something that's a little easier for people to understand. And we're gonna change that to percent style. So from accounting style to a percent style, so that way we can see we have 18%. And I can even increase the number of decimals here so that we can see a little bit more what's happening. So it's not 18%, 17.6%, right? It makes it a little easier to see. I think I mentioned before how most people like to see 1 to 2 decimals. So that's just stuff to keep in mind. Okay. So that's what happened at that week. I am going to copy, and I'm going to paste the week after that. So I'm just going up by 7s if you want to kind of see where I'm getting that from. So 21 plus 7 will be 28. The next one would be 35. Then the next one would be 42. Then the next one would be 49, which is where I ended at. So I can see that the forecasted growth projection would go from 17.6% down to 7.4, down to 1.6, and then down even more. So like these are still increases, they're just slow increases, right? This increased by 17.6%. This increased, but not by much. It only increased by 7.4. This increased, but not by much at all, only by 1.6. This actually decreased, and then it went up again. Which, if you think about like behaviorally, when do you go buy candies for Halloween, right? You probably will start at the beginning of the month and then save the huge thing of it, right? Then as the rest of the month goes on, you don't buy as much. As we get closer to Halloween, everyone already has their stuff. You already have everything saved and ready to go. And then at the day of Halloween or like the week of, you may go out and buy a bunch more, or you're like, ooh, it's on sale. I'm gonna go, get all the Snickers and Baby Ruths that I can now because I know the prices are super cheap because stores are trying to get rid of it. So sales shoot up again. Okay. So behavioral stuff does play a big role in analytics. So it's kind of nice to have an understanding of what's going on and be able to explain that to someone. If you're doing this for your own company or for another company, you want to have some type of behavioral explanation, not something that you can say is definite. I mean, you would want to eventually say something's definite, but you can also just do it as kind of like a correlation. Like I see there's a relationship between the days of the month and how much I'm selling and the percentage of growth I'm having. Okay, cool. Any questions there? All right, so next thing we're gonna do is we want to project how much income and expenses that we would have for the month of October. Okay, and so you may be asking yourself, why didn't we include stuff for September then? Well, think about it this way. If you have a candy store, you sell candy every day, right? But October comes, it goes up. You expect this to happen. It's like if you're in a restaurant business, if you own a restaurant or any business at all, you have certain points where you realize that you're going to have an increase in sales because it's like a certain time of year, something happens. There's always a seasonal trend in regards to services. And that seasonal trend doesn't have to be like one of the 4 seasons. It could be, for instance, in education, we know there's a trend that when there's a depression and the economy is not doing well, what happens is that the education stocks go up because people want to go back to school more. They need to get new skills, So that shoots up. Yeah, there's other things you can look at too. But anyway, I'm just mentioning that. So we want to look at what was normal beforehand. So if we look at September sales, or at least part of it, we can kind of get a trend of what was normally happening. So then we can see the impact of, oh, it's Halloween season time for people to buy a bunch of candy. We can see what happens. So, okay. Anyway, the more data you have from the past, the better. It makes it easier to get that understanding, easier to smooth things out too. So, all right. So what I want to do is I want to understand more about my sales of October. So what I'm going to do is in A51, I typed October sales. In B51, I'm going to take the sum of that. So that was B19 to B49. Oops, I did not put my sum. B19, B49. If you're not sure if that was October, take a look here. October starts on row 19. So those are my cells there. I'm going to go over to this projected income worksheet. And when I look at this, I'm trying to get an understanding of how much income I'm going to have coming in for Randy's Candy Store. So to do this, I need to know what my sales were for October. That's what it says, right? I see sales, I see October. So in order to get that, I know that's on the other sheet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this equal to, go to the sales sheet, my sales for October, look in the formula bar, notice I have that equals sales, exclamation point, B51. This is still referring to what we have on the projected income sheet. So I'm going to press enter. Notice that that gets copied in, or it gets retrieved. So it goes over here and says, hey, what are these values? And it brings it back over here. So great part about this is if I ever go back and change any of these, this will automatically change. Okay. So a couple of things, we want to give this guy a accounting number format. So I'm just going to select that there. Of course, some of this stuff becomes hard to see, so I could auto-fit this if I wanted to. I'm just going to leave it alone for now. I'm going to go back to my projected income here. And I am going to do 12 months. So to do that, I just use the fill handle to copy all the way over into M based on the instructions for the next 12 months. So October to September of next year. It's 12 months. So I'm going to want to project what's happening to my income based off that. And so I'm going to center these. Makes it a little easier to see, right? People like things centered. And then in C3, I'm going to use what I have for B3. So the sales for October, I'm going to use them to predict the sales for November. And so to do that, I'm going to use the formula that was given to you, which says take B3 times parentheses 1 plus the absolute reference of B12. And what that is if I look here, it says required sales growth, 25%. That means I am saying that sales must grow by 25% each month. That is the expectation, and therefore that is what I'm going to project happen. So I'm predicting that's what will happen. And so that means I'm taking the sales I had from October and I'm adding 25% more of that to it. And so when I do that, this is my result. Okay. And just like this guy is counting style just 0 decimals, I'm going to do the same thing for this guy. I'm going to make this currency 0 sell style. Okay. And then I'm going to copy that over for the rest of them. So they should, each one should be based off the previous month's sales. So I can see what my projected income would be. So I should be going up by 25% each time. And if you did the math, you would see that that is exactly what is happening each time. Okay. All right. So I was also asked to copy over B6 and B7 all for the rest of the months as well. And so this is getting my projected costs or costs related to sales and costs unrelated to sales. And this means that I can do Autosum on this, and it'll take care of that for me. Because this is the sum of costs, so all my expenses. So these should also be the same. So the cost related to sales and the cost unrelated to sales. We want to see how much we're spending. The last part here, gross profit loss. Profit is based off how much you make from selling things or revenue, minus your expenses or how much it costs for you to even sell that stuff or to have it in stock. And so your profit is the difference between those two, which that makes sense, right? If you sell a candy bar for $2, but only costs you $1 to get, you gained $1. So you do the subtraction of those. And so this has already been set up. Take what's in row 3 minus what's in row 8. And so I'm going to then just copy this over. You'll notice that some of these numbers have parentheses around it. What that parentheses denotes is a negative value, which makes sense. If I take 86,000 something minus 103,000, it would be a negative number. That means we lost money. So this first month in October, we lose about 16,000. November, we lose about 7. Then we start gaining money. We start having some profit. And by the end of the year, we're reckoning the dough. So, all right, that's about it there. So I think I'll stop here. All that's left is doing the break-even point, which is quite simple. We're going to look at it as a graph as well. But remember, the break-even point I mentioned earlier is just what do you need to sell something, and what price do you need to sell something at so that you don't lose any money, right? Do we want to be losing $16,000 and then $7,000? No one wants to do that. Even if you know later on you're going to get 3 and 16 and so on, you don't want to lose $16,000 in a month. You don't want to lose 7,000 something a month, right? That not only does that look bad, it probably is not very encouraging. Like if you lost $16,000 in the first month, you have to have some very good confidence to be like, don't worry, at the end of the year, I'm gonna get that $300,000. Most people don't think that, especially in the second month when they lost more money, it's gonna hurt. I've seen a lot of businesses crumble after you know, like 3 months because they've lost so much money. And usually it's not because they don't have enough to back it up, but it's usually because they're afraid, which understandable, completely understandable. But the long call is usually the best way, but you do have to know when to cut your losses. But anyway, we can look at a break-even point, and we'll look at that next time. So I believe that you all said that you would like to meet on, so I guess I'll pause the recording now.